I'm Marc Alan here on Cash 22. We'll bring in young, up-and-coming professionals and have them mentored right here on the show in a variety of different fields and professions. You were made to do amazing things with your career. So let's get started. Welcome back to Cash 22. Today's topic is lawyers or attorneys. I'm actually not sure which is the correct term. Maybe we'll find out during this interview. But our first guest is Alex Aggen, who just graduated from the University of Michigan Law School. Alex, thanks for being with us.
Glad to be here.
And congratulations, 3 years under your belt. Amazing.
It's exciting to be done. It was an enjoyable time to be certain in law school, but it's also kind of nice to have that chapter wrapped up.
Do you feel like you imagined you would feel when you graduated from law school?
So if I were to look back at maybe the end of my first year of law school, it might be similar to that. It's a little different than perhaps it was coming into law school completely. I had certain notions that law school was going to be a little bit more of an opportunity to really get hands-on. And there are some opportunities, and I made sure to really dig into those, but it was a little different. So I kind of left feeling that law school gave me the ability to think like an attorney, which is something that most law schools acknowledge. You know, we're going to teach you to think like a lawyer, even if we don't actually teach you how to be a lawyer. So I came in hoping there'd be a little more of the teach you how to be a lawyer along with the thinking like a lawyer, but looking back, it's been primarily how to think like a lawyer, which is still great. It's still a good skill, and I've enjoyed my 3 years to be certain, but a little different in that aspect, but feelings of just relief, and it's glad to be done, and I don't have to take a final anymore, which a lot of people in a lot of disciplines can relate to, of not having more tests. But law school is unique that there is a 3 or 4 or perhaps even 5 hour long final at the end of a semester, and there's nothing in between. No homework, no midterms, no tests, no quizzes, assignments. So you just learn and learn and learn and learn and read incredibly long textbooks, and then you just have one opportunity at the end to take one test, and it's usually 3 hypothetical situations. So they say someone did X, someone else did Y, what should be the legal result, and then you just write as fast as you possibly can.
Wow. So you need to be very good at English, I assume, to be in law school, correct?
Writing definitely helps. There are people who are not liberal arts type majors in law school, but it's probably over half that are. And one of my best friends was a chemical engineer here. One of my best friends in the law school was a chemical engineer previous.
And he survived the program?
And he survived, and he did quite well, but it definitely helps to be able to write and write frequently.
And you decided to apply to the University of Michigan. Why this program? Were there others that were appealing as well? Why did you choose Michigan?
So a piece of that is Michigan is a very well-regarded law school, and also is very, perhaps national is the word, in that it places people across all over the country and all over the world. And coming out of my undergraduate experience, I just kind of kept working for a couple of years, and I realized that as I was heading and preparing for law school, I knew I wanted to be able to go somewhere that would give me multiple opportunities. Because I came into law school thinking there are 12 different types of attorney I would like to be. I would like to do all these different things, and very aware that perhaps I could end up doing 2 in my lifetime, most likely only 1, and that's great. But not knowing exactly what I would hone in on, I wanted a lot of opportunities there. And Michigan has an incredibly large alumni base of just the law school. And if you then count the undergraduates, people who are here that went to other law schools, there's just a lot of connections out there to be able to open a lot of different doors to do a lot of different types of law in a lot of different parts around the world. So Michigan is not unique in that, but it's one of only a few that are a law school where you can really get a lot of great experience. And Michigan also built itself as being very collegial, that the students like to be there and they like each other and they're not at each other's throats. And there's a famous book called, I think it's just called 1L, and then there is a famous movie called The Paper Chase, and there are various things showing that law school is this experience where everything's very cutthroat. People hiding books from each other so people can't go find them and things like that.
Wow.
And that by no means appealed to me. And there are certain schools that have a reputation of being a little more cutthroat. And whether the reputation is perfectly deserved, I don't know. But I just said, all right, I'll steer away from those, and Michigan was regarded as being one that was very good. And so then I tried to reach out and talk to a lot of people who'd actually been either at Michigan or a few other schools on my short list. And I had some family who was actually here in Ann Arbor for a while, and so they knew some people I could talk to who'd gone through the law program here, and everything they said matched with what I was looking for. And it's actually been the case too. Not just that they say that,
Okay.
but
It lived up to the expectation.
It's absolutely lived up to the expectation that everyone is really there to help each other out. They're trying to do their best, but not at the expense of anyone else. And I had the opportunity to be in Washington, D.C. at a national competition as a first-year student. And there were people there from all kinds of different schools around the country. And as it turns out, it wasn't open to first-year students. The competition was only open to third-year students, graduating students.
How'd you make it?
They let us in. I don't know.
Right.
I mean, we showed up there and they said, well, where's your faculty advisor? And we said, oh, we don't have one. And they said, well, but the person you've taken the course from the, the year before when you applied. And we said, oh, we're just here. And so then all kind of unraveled. And they said, well, you submitted everything. You followed all the rules. I guess we'll let you stay. We were there. They weren't going to turn us away. Had a spot in the competition. And we ended up doing pretty well. But at the first night, there was a dinner for all the competitors. And all these third-year students about to graduate said, don't worry, we know your first year is terrible and you all hate each other, but it'll get better, we promise. And myself and my fellow Michigan student I was competing with, we looked at each other and said, we really like our first year. We really like Michigan. So it's definitely held up to be a good place.
That sounds like a great experience, and amazing that you could get in as a first year. Another question I have for you is, when did you decide that you wanted to go to law school and actually become a lawyer? What was that point in your life?
So I am the child of 2 attorneys.
Okay.
And so my actual instinct was to flee from law, if at all possible. I thought, well, they were both attorneys. I can't possibly look at going into law. And there were a lot of things that would appeal to me, and I did a lot of kind of debate and mock trial related things in my younger years and really enjoyed them, but I still thought, well, I really think I'd really like law, but I certainly can't do that. And I went into my undergraduate experience and I was planning on, maybe I'll think about law. I still really like a lot of things that would appeal to me on that. But I was actually a psychology major, and I decided, well, I think I want to go become a psychologist. And I actually had an internship working in a state prison doing therapy with inmates. And it made me realize 2 things. One, I can do therapy, I like it, but I don't want to do it for the rest of my life. And so it just, the people who have it, it's a different constitution perhaps than I have. And so I thought, well, I don't want to go spend another couple of years in school to, get the right degree after my bachelor's degree to then be able to go do this if I'm only going to work for a few years. And I also became re-interested a lot in criminal law. And as an extension of that, just kind of really digging back into, well, there's a lot of things that appeal to me about, the kind of legal system. And so I then kind of doubled down trying to find opportunities to get into courtrooms, get experience with things, volunteer with Guardian Ad Litem. It's a youth-based program where children have one attorney assigned by the state to help represent their interests, but that attorney has 300, 400, 500 children they're working with, and so they have these it's called a CASA, a court-appointed special advocate. So they have people, volunteers, who help kind of on a more one-on-one level with the children to know what's going on. But I'd still end up getting to go into court with that. And I try to talk to more attorneys and kind of really work into the legal side of things. And even jobs I had, I worked at a startup company, and it was something of a default in-house legal team because we didn't have one. So I'd work on other people, helping them out with contracts and other things I got involved with. And the thing that overall appeals to me about law, both before and that kind of re-engaged me a little bit, was that with law, you've got kind of a set of rules, but for the most part, everyone's playing with the same rules, and you've got a set of facts. And the facts don't really change. Your opinion on them might. And that's really what you get into, is that you have an opportunity to come up with why you should be right. And I've been married coming 7 years, and my wife will tell you that I do like to be right. I try not to.
That's dangerous.
To do it, do it in a bad way. But what I also like about law is that you can still lose, if that kind of makes sense. That there's high stakes on everything that you're working on, and that there's a winner and a loser. And yes, there are appeals and opportunities to revisit or look at things differently. But if you're working on a matter that is so lopsided or one-sided, at least if you're doing on the civil side of things, there's something called summary judgment, or there's ways of kind of looking at things where it may be a directed verdict. There's the whole category where things are so lopsided that we don't even have to go any further. And that'll certainly come up, I'm sure, in my career a lot. A large number of cases never actually end up going to trial or never end up completing trial. But there's still those cases that when they do, both sides have really strong arguments. So it's a chance for you to really show, here's why my argument is the winning argument. And I enjoy that. I enjoy kind of being on my feet. I enjoy making an argument and preparing and researching to be able to do that. But it's not necessarily something I want to do every second of every day. And for that reason, I realized law lets me do a lot of that. But despite what you might see on TV, the attorneys are not in the courtroom nonstop all day, every day, barring a very few minor exceptions.
I actually did a little research on the bar and what the bar exam is. I understand you're studying for that. Something I learned in the research was that the bar refers to the little wall or bar in the courtroom, whereas if you pass the bar, you can work on the other side of that little wall or bar, and then the rest of the world is in the audience there. How's that going, studying for the bar?
There are moments where I say I'm happy to sit in the gallery rather than being across the bar. But I've enjoyed studying for the bar. There are 8 core subjects that are tested, and every state's a little bit different, but there's also something called the uniform or multi-state bar exam that are portions of things that are used across perhaps half of the states. And I'm applying to go to the Missouri bar, and that's one of the states that uses this uniform thing. And so I'm studying kind of more general law. It's not as much focused on Missouri-specific law, and so it's a lot more principles of law, but actually as they'd actually pan out. So law school was thinking about things. So I had a class on property law, and for about the first month of that class, we learned about a fox hunting case in which 2 people were hunting foxes and who got to own the fox when they finally caught it. That's a long time to think about one case. Whereas in my bar exam course, I've spent maybe 3 days learning about property and learned about all of property. I learned about all the rules. I didn't really learn about any of the cases or thinking of why a judge might decide to make a small choice or why a very particular sentence was even written, which is what you do in law school. You look at, well, why did they write this sentence? Why do they choose that word sometimes? Whereas in prepping for the bar exam, it's here's every rule you have to learn. Don't bother asking too much of why you have to learn those rules or why the rule is exactly what it is. Just learn it and learn it and learn it. And so I've enjoyed, for the first time, feeling like I'm learning what attorneys actually know. But it's also a very grueling, it's a lot of work. It's a whole lot of work, but I enjoy it, and it's also been an interesting opportunity to learn more of things I've already studied, as well as areas of law that I haven't had at all. So there are certain, the typical law school curriculum is your first year, the law school gives you courses that you have to take, kind of doctrinal core courses, and then you choose later on the courses you take. And so evidence is kind of a core part of law in general sense, but I chose to take that in my second year, even though it wasn't given to me. So some of my classmates have never taken an evidence class, but I never took a family law class. So I had opportunity now studying for the bar to learn all about family law, and there's a lot of interesting things that go on there, and though I may never practice family law, the things that affect families and people in general day-to-day things are also the things I feel like my neighbors or my sisters or cousins may call and say, hey, I want to know about this, things that often actually would touch on them. So it's been interesting to kind of feel like I'm actually learning what an attorney generally should know.
Okay. And you decided to go into court or criminal law, is that correct?
So I'm going to be a litigator, which is not exactly a trial attorney. So it's not something where I'm in trial all the time, always. I'm settling or hoping to, come up with answers and work on things in disputes. And I'll be doing primarily civil work, so I'll be out of the criminal system. And I'm definitely interested in the criminal system as well, but I've just kind of, similar to my experience with working with inmates in a state prison, in the psychology experience, I realized I could do this. I don't know if I could do it very, very well. And something where I don't necessarily know if I'd want to do it forever, whereas it might just be kind of a pro bono part of my practice. But in terms of doing the litigation, it's something where you're still preparing with the eventuality that you will end up in court and you will prosecute, you will take things all the way through, but you're not prosecuting a case, you're not bringing charges against someone in the same sense or defending someone on a criminal side, but you could have kind of counterclaims where both sides are saying, we had a contract and things went south, or trying to resolve, related to a bankruptcy, who gets what, or different elements that may come up there of anything that may come up for the clients that we have.
And how difficult is it to change paths once you've decided your direction in law?
So the actual answer to this question, we may have to defer to someone who's been practicing, an actual licensed attorney.
From
but
your understanding.
From my own understanding and experience, I can say that I had an opportunity to do an externship, or kind of a clerkship as they might call it, an opportunity during both of my summers to do two different types of law. And the thing I did in my first summer was something I enjoyed, and I realized, okay, I can kind of check this off a little on my list of here's the parts I did like and here's the things I didn't like. And then the second summer I did healthcare law almost exclusively. And I really enjoyed it, but then as I was coming out of law school trying to find some different jobs in a different market, everyone said, well, you're a healthcare attorney. Why do you want to do these other things? And you were a healthcare attorney doing a lot of transactional work. I see you did some litigation work, but why do you want to do lots of litigation work now? And it was always something to kind of have to explain of, well, I'm coming out of law school. We all have to acknowledge none of us know anything, but it was interesting to see there was some kind of pushback against me wanting to change what type of attorney I was, even though I had yet to actually become an attorney. And
That's
from people I've talked to actually out practicing, there's not a lot of people who will jump too dramatically from one side to the other if they don't do it within the first maybe 2 or 3 years.
Okay. So this is an important time in your career, right?
Yeah,
now.
try to get it right so you don't have to worry about that. And if you don't, maybe recognize that you are a little more passionate about something else sooner than later to redirect. Because if you are 10 years into your career and then trying to change, everyone says, well, but you've got so much experience, You're much more valuable to us doing something else, even if you said, but I really want to get into this. So
what other types of law are of interest to you?
So I have a decent interest in kind of certain realms of law, but primarily still working within the litigation aspect. So I'd still love to work and get involved with healthcare. And whether that's with doctors, hospitals, the healthcare system broadly, I really enjoy that, as well as real estate. I've gotten involved a little bit with that, and I think there's a lot of interesting things going there, and the work I'm going to go do will certainly touch on some of that. In terms of things that I have an interest in that might not fit within kind of the civil litigation side, I do have an interest still in criminal law. So this this final year, I was able to do something a little hands-on at least, and I was part of the Michigan Innocence Clinic, which is a non-DNA innocence clinic, so it seeks to exonerate people using the legal system and certainly evidence and things that come up, but a lot of the innocence clinics are focused strictly on, if DNA proves it wasn't you, then we'll take your case. But we look at all kinds of other things, including other bad sciences. There's a lot of junk science, and junk science being kind of a term that's strange, but in arson and shaken baby cases, there's a lot of things that people just assumed was science, even though it had no foundation in science. And a lot of that's being thrown out of courts all around the country. And so people that have had past convictions will be coming to the Innocence Clinic looking for experience there and helping them. And so it's a lot more appeals, which I'll be doing less appellate work probably. Meaning I'll be doing the first level of things instead of saying I don't like, or the first decision is wrong and we're going to change it around. So it was a different type in that it was appeals. It was different that it was criminal as well. But I really enjoyed all the clients I was able to work with, and whether it was they'd been new to the clinic or whether they'd been with the clinic for 5 or 6 years trying to work through. And one of those cases that had been with the clinic longer than 5 or 6 years, even a good long time, it was someone that just recently was able to have the Michigan Supreme Court overturn their case. And it took them, I want to say maybe 8 years. It took that long for something that was wrong to get changed around. And law certainly, I think, is a great tool to help, right wrongs and make things just and make things fair. It still takes a long time sometimes, and so that's something that I'd be interested in working in, that kind of on the pro bono side, maybe having a case or two along the way. But it might be something where if I were to want to dedicate myself to it fully, I would have to have already done it, if that makes sense. But
you would need an amazing amount of patience to work on a case for 8 or 10 years.
And it still may come up on the civil side as well. That an attorney I know well has actually argued before the United States Supreme Court on civil cases. And if you thought it takes a long time, for if you've ever dealt with traffic court maybe or something like that, you thought, oh, this is taking forever. The process, if you're going through those level of appeals, is not a quick one, to be certain.
I imagine there are lawyers out there that have spent most of their careers working on single cases.
There certainly can be, and even so, I'm going to a smaller firm. I wasn't interested in going to a very, very large firm for a large number of reasons, which I can talk about more if you're interested. But a big part of it is that I know attorneys who will spend several years of their life working on one piece of one case, not just one case.
Like the movie Aaron Brockovich.
I haven't seen it, but I understand that it was a water quality issue or something like that, or
it's something with the
some
power
pollution
company,
or something going on.
PG&E, something like that.
I'm sure it was just one long case in all kinds of different years. But instead of necessarily working on one case, there are people who maybe only work on one element of that case or one piece of discovery for a year or something like that. So.
Okay, let's talk about people that are considering going to law school. Maybe they're interested, maybe they're watching this and saying, that sounds really interesting. I'd like to also become a lawyer. What are the steps they need to take to even get into law school?
Well, I'm gonna take a moment, and you said people who want to go to law school, that the first thing that every attorney tells someone who says, I want to go to law school, is don't go to law school.
Okay.
And I told you I liked it, I told you I'm excited for it, and I can tell you I heard those same pieces of advice.
Why do they say that?
It's two reasons, and one is that it's not necessarily everything you might expect if your only exposure to law is what you've seen, and the other is that it's a large commitment, and if you're going to go through law school, you want to make sure it's really what you want to do, really want to make sure it's what's going on, and then coupled recently with the economic downturn, the legal market's taken a big hit. So a lot of people assume, well, if I go to any law school and I just go, whether or not I do well or work hard, I'll be able to go out and work as any type of lawyer I want to be. And that's not necessarily the case at all.
So selecting the right school is very important.
And making sure you want to do it. So there are people who, if they know I want to be an immigration attorney in Corpus Christi, Texas, you can go to a law school, go out, open up your own shop, and start working. And you'll learn and master your craft and be really good at what you're wanting to do. But if you say, I only want to work as a clerk for the United States Supreme Court, and then I want to become a judge myself, it's not something so automatic necessarily. So make sure you know what you want to do for law school. And that even in terms of that even applies to how you're going to apply to law school. Make sure you're applying to the right law schools. Law schools are pretty open about acknowledging all that they do well. So Michigan likes to say that it really has a great international focus. And that may be absolutely a fact. I've seen that in different ways. But I came into Michigan saying, well, I know I don't want to be an international lawyer. That's nice. That's a part of what they have. But understand what's good about them. But talk to people who have gone there. Talk to people who maybe chose not to go there as well. And find out maybe what's not perfect about that law school to make sure it's the right one for you. In terms of actually applying, the first step is, to a certain degree, is make sure you have to take the LSAT. It's an admissions test that is, I want to say maybe it's like a 3-hour or 4-hour long test. I mean, it's long, it takes a lot of preparation as well, but it's not kind of the same.
Is it mostly reading, writing?
It's reading comprehension in large part, and then there's something called logic games on it. Kind of one of those, Alex, Mark, and Dee all decided to go to a roller coaster, and one of them sat in front and Mark wasn't in the middle. And you have to kind of start deducing who was which, in what order, or what their relationships were.
How do you prep for that test?
You study, and it's not the type of study necessarily that you have to do for the bar study. I'm sure some people do. What I did is there was a test prep company offering the chance to take the LSAT or the MCAT or the GRE, GMAT, all kinds of different graduate admissions tests that they were offering a free sit down of a previous year's test. And I thought, okay, I'll go take a fake LSAT, just sitting down cold, and see how I do. And I did very well, and so I thought, okay, so this wouldn't be a terrible decision because I'd probably be able to get into some good schools. And just based on that, then I did study for it, and I took a handful of other practice tests on my own. And looking back, perhaps I should have studied an extra 10 or 30 hours or 100 hours, and it may have made a difference of a point or two, but some of it's just a little.
Well.
I did well, and some of it's just a little luck. So I got to a point where on all my practice tests, I was getting in the same very tight range of scores, and I thought, well, it'll probably be in there. Maybe it'll be one higher or lower. But it's so tight, if that makes sense, that if you were to get 1 point higher, perhaps you could get into a school you wouldn't have otherwise been able to go to, or perhaps with 1 point higher, you would be able to, get an extra $1,000 in scholarship or something like that. So study for the LSAT, study harder than you think you ought to, but don't stress it out too much. And then the other parts of the admissions are, there's a governing body called LSAC that allows you to apply directly to many schools at once.
Okay.
And then you'll still have specific things you might have to do unique to
saves
that
you
school.
time.
Yeah, but it can save a lot of time, and it costs money to apply to schools. And to send your transcripts and have LSAC be that kind of central umbrella, I think is like maybe $25 for every school you apply to.
Okay.
But then the schools themselves can charge $20, $50, $100, $200 to apply to them as well. And my little tip there is if you basically just write the school and say, I'm interested in applying, but I can't afford your admissions fee, they'll usually send you a waiver. And sometimes even before you ask, they might reach out to you and say, we'd love to have you apply. Here's a waiver of that admissions fee. So you still might have to pay that $25, but that way if you're applying to 10 schools, that's not cheap, but it's better than paying $200 for every school.
Oh, that's nice. Is there another introspective question people can ask themselves if they're considering going to law school, considering taking the LSAT? How do they really know that they're cut out for this?
So at least one question you have to ask yourself is, do I like to read? A lot. And don't get me wrong, I just polished off a book my wife was reading for her book club. I picked it up and just read through it in a night or two really quick, and I do enjoy reading, but you need to ask yourself, do I like reading even when it's not, my preferred topic or popular fiction or an autobiography? that I had a case book that was 1,800 pages long that I had to read in a semester.
Wow.
And that's a lot of material to get through, and it's very dense material. And so you have to ask yourself, do I like to read, and am I willing to focus on the details? And sometimes even hyper-focus. You need to really understand not just what the rule is, but what the 3 exceptions to the rule are, and then what the exceptions to the exceptions are. And you have to know all of those things and try to get them right, because you're working for some client of some form, and they're expecting you to get it perfect. And so you have to be able to really be the type of person who can focus on all those details to really understand how to get it right. Because the difference between shall and should and may could have 3 completely different outcomes based on even just the words you choose.
Well, Alex, based on what you've said, I'm not sure I'm cut out for law school. That sounds pretty challenging. I really appreciate you sharing all of this with us, though. I think it's been very interesting. And we wish you the very best of luck on the bar exam and your career as a lawyer. Thanks again for being on Cash 22.
Enjoyed being in, Mark.
Great.